I lead an asset management research group at the university, at the Institute for Manufacturing at the Department of Engineering. My main research interests are in looking at how we can improve the way in which we manage our industrial and infrastructure assets, specifically looking at how we can use data and digital technologies to improve the way in which we make decisions. So it's a pleasure for me to take the session for you. So without any further ado, we'll go straight into our workshop. I'm hoping that my voice and everything is coming off clearly so you can hear me properly. So Bidan introduced the goals of this workshop earlier, but I just wanted to re-emphasize what we are going to do today. So today's session, we will hopefully by the end of the session, you will understand the importance of data in asset management. You will be able to identify what are the key critical pieces of asset data that you should capture and manage so that you can do your asset management activities more effectively. And finally, especially in tomorrow's session, but partly today's session as well, you will learn how asset data can be effectively utilized in addition to learning how it can be effectively captured as well. So I want to start today's session by asking you a question, just for me to get to know you a bit better. What type of assets are you responsible for? So we'll put up a Zoom poll so you can tell me what kind of assets you are responsible for. So Warner, can you bring up the Zoom poll, please? Yeah. And Mohan, feel free to comment on the responses here as well.
Yeah, so responses are coming. And now the civil and structural assets are leading. We're getting more. So now 70, 80, more than 80 participants are responding, still civil and structural. Then water and electricity, sewerage and buildings. For 5 items are clearly coming. Okay, we already have 125 participants responded out of 183.
It's kind of similar to the other workshops as well, isn't it, Mohan? Many of the participants are coming from civil and structural background, and then you have a few buildings and water, other utilities. Great, I think.
Yeah, not, I think we can move ahead. As civil and structural leading. Yeah, over to Ajit.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Let me stop sharing this poll. Close the poll. Okay, thanks a lot for sharing that with me. It's similar to the other ones that we have run as well. Most of the participants come from that civil and structural engineering background. Of course, most of our infrastructure lies in that domain as well. So again, the next up, moving ahead, before we go through the rest of the workshop, again, I wanted to get your feel of the answer to this question. Why is asset data important? Why do you think asset data is important? This will be run through Menti, and I believe if we go to the chat, the Menti link should be appearing in the chat. So if you can send your answers through the Menti poll, hopefully the point of this question here is that we start this workshop with this question, we get your answer, and hopefully by the end of this workshop, you will have a slightly improved answer because you might have a better understanding of why asset data is important. I'm sure you'll have a good appreciation of why it is important to have good asset data. So Mohan, once the Menti outputs are ready, you could probably take us through that, the responses.
Yeah, sure.
just to make sure that we don't run into the screen sharing problem, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Warner can share the answers. There we go.
Yeah, answers are coming. I mean, asset data is important. We are getting answers like important due to sustainable use and efficient use. I mean, evaluation of assets and to keep inventory for longer, use of assets, safeguarding, of course, planning for budgeting and maintenance, sustainability. That's, I mean, maximum benefit out of the assets. Without asset data, we cannot proper planning for asset management. That's very much true. Decision making, of course, that's part of asset management. To capture real picture of data, a lot of good answers are coming. Since I can see our participants are very much attached to the infrastructure assets management, maybe developing more and more assets, but still we feel the importance of it to manage and maintain the asset properly, to fulfill our goals and targets. Data is basic thing for the management. True. That's what Ajit is going to talk about. The policy formulation, efficient use. Without data and information, we cannot even think about policy, right? So sustainable use is again coming. For maintenance purpose, yes, when we do the infrastructure, we always think about operation and maintenance. That's very important. Planning purpose, very true. Keeping records and documentation of assets to make it easier for monitoring and operation, and replacement as well. Very true. To know about exact information about assets, to minimize fiduciary risks. Wow, that's very good one. Yeah, lot of responses are coming. Better control of assets, decision making, efficient and smooth handling of asset management. Very true. Yeah, maybe over to Ajit.
Okay, thank you. Great answers. They're all correct answers as well. I'm really pleased to hear that you've got a clear sense of the importance of asset data. What I'll do is that for over the next 3 or 4 slides to take you through some specific examples of why asset data might become really handy in terms of managing your assets. So first off, we all know that our assets deteriorate over time. Their condition gets worse over time. Now, as your assets age, you'll start seeing leaks appearing in pipes or potholes appearing in roads and so on. Now, any asset will have a natural deterioration process, right? And you probably have a good understanding of the natural deterioration process. But on top of this natural deterioration, a number of different factors like build quality, the way they are used, the way they are maintained, they all will have an impact on the condition of these assets at any point in time. Now, deteriorating assets, they pose all sorts of challenges for all communities. Now, if you think about a road with a lot of potholes in it, they will affect the users of the road, right? The journey times are going to get longer. There might even be more accidents as vehicles try and swerve and avoid those potholes. And the worse these potholes get, the more money it takes to money and resources and so on it takes to fix them. Now, these visible problems, they are easier to handle. You might notice them and repair such visible problems. However, you could miss some of the hidden, and often these hidden problems are more serious problems like structural deficiencies in buildings. And if they get worse, they could lead to really catastrophic consequences such as collapse of a structure. Now, if you maintain up-to-date information about effective inspection schedules, for instance, they can help catch such hidden problems before they cause serious service disruptions. Now, even with the visible defects that we were talking about earlier, if you have up-to-date data about the condition of these assets, it can help you in understanding that deterioration pattern and the rate of degradation so that you can plan your maintenance activities in advance. So that is one of the reasons why we need good asset data about our assets, so we can really understand the deterioration of our assets better and use that for planning. Now, another reason is, as you all would agree, as asset managers, we have to deal with tight budgets. Now, you might be experiencing this yourself. Year on year, we might be being asked to do more with less money. There's never enough money to fix all the problems when they need to be fixed. Now, if you have good data about your assets, it will help you identify which are the assets that are critical for providing the services and which are the most critical actions that you need to undertake. Now, this will inform efficient and appropriate prioritization of your very limited funds. Now, sometimes you'll even have to justify the use of the funds to your superiors, your political leaders, and so on. You might even have to explain why you need to spend so much money. Right? Now, sometimes you might even need to request an increase in your funding to enable you to carry out these essential works that you need to do. Now, if you have good, reliable information about your assets, it will help you build that business case for your decisions, and it will help you develop an evidence-based justification for the maintenance, renewal, and replacement of your assets in your portfolio. So that's another reason why you need to have good data, so that you can rationalize your decisions, you can make a good case, you can make a good argument about why you want to spend the money that you want to spend. And the other thing is, when it comes to asset management, we are really not dealing with the democracy here. All assets are not equal. Now, if I ask you which of your assets are critical for providing the level of service required for your communities, you might be tempted to answer, well, all of them. All of my assets are critical. But then if you think back, it's obviously not true, right? Of course, all of your assets play a different role in providing a service functionality, and some assets are more critical than others for service provision. Now, without accurate data, you will be fighting fires every day. Whenever an asset fails, you'll think, oh, that's a critical asset, that's a critical failure, and go running around to fix it. For example, how can you tell if a particular bridge is a critical asset if you don't know how many people rely on it for travel? How can you tell, for instance, how the failure of a particular pump might be affecting your water distribution system? How can you tell if this particular pump requires immediate maintenance if you're not really monitoring its performance? So without good data about your assets, failures can often come as a surprise. And then when the failures come, you might not have the resources ready to deal with it. So if you have a good asset management system, if you have a good asset management information system, it will help you ask the right questions, fill in the missing gaps, and deliver effective information to enable good decision making. Okay, so hopefully that kind of reiterating your own points that you made in the Menti poll, the importance of asset data. And we'll discover more as we go on during this workshop. So let's look at another Menti poll now. So the question here at this time is, what data do you collect about your assets? Now we'll be looking at what kind of data should you be collecting about your assets, but I'm sure in your day-to-day life, you're not saying, okay, we don't have any data about our assets. So I want to get a feel of what data do you actually collect. So there'll be a Menti poll link on the chat. So if you can go to the chat and tell us what data do you actually collect, then we can look at the results. Mohan, over to you to talk through the results.
Sure.
I'll stop my screen share so this can happen effectively.
So the question is, what type of data, you collect? Yes. Yeah, answers are coming up. Location, cost, transportation, number of users, population, the book value, the accounting term is coming. Okay, the valuation, transportation, manufacturing date, lot of information, very good information are coming. Importance, the age. Okay, the cost, location, and valuation is leading. Most of our participants are voting for that. Location is still location. Yes, that's very true. The location of asset is very important. Otherwise, we'll not know whether our asset register represents real physical assets or not. That also captures by the audit as well. So we all are aware. Location, cost, valuation, the status. Yeah, lot of answers coming. Yeah, very good answers, very good responses from our participants. From here, I mean, Ajit will be like very comfortable presenting his I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
slides. Yeah, over to you, Ajit.
Thank you, thank you. It's actually very, very pleasing to hear that most of the things that are coming through are the things that we are actually going to be talking about in greater detail as well. And location has come through as the lead here. But one thing I noticed is also that cost and valuation has come through as well. And you will be spending a lot of time tomorrow talking about the financial aspects of asset data and how to get a valuation of your assets, how to calculate depreciation of your assets, how to get costs and so on. So I'm really pleased to hear what you guys are capturing. So let me get back to my screen. Right. Hopefully that will come through. Great, great. First off, before we actually go into our data collection and talking about what kind of data is required, let me get some definitions right, so you're aware of the subtle differences in these terminologies, and it'll help you in setting your conversations right when you're talking to people about data and information and so on. So data are facts that are presented in raw format, often unorganized and unprocessed. Information, on the other hand, results from the interpretation, organization, and contextualization of this data. And I'll take you through a couple of examples so you really understand what I'm talking about. Let's take one example. We can say the length of a road is 1.5 kilometers. Now, this is data. Now, if we say the length of all roads in our municipality is 25 kilometers, out of which 2 kilometers are critical. Now, this is information because it informs your decision about which roads to fix first, right? If I take another example, we can say the pressure readings from this boiler is 3.5 bar. Now, this is data. Now, if I say the pressure readings from this boiler is 3.5 bar and it is too high for safe operation, but this is information because it informs your decision whether to switch off the boiler. So this means data needs to be transformed and possibly merged with other pieces of data to be able to inform your decisions. So that's the subtle difference between data and information. Now, if we think about asset data, again, starting to think about, okay, what data do we need and so on, one of the primary questions that you should start asking off is, who needs asset data? It's clear that having good asset data is essential for asset managers to effectively carry out their duties. But when thinking about what data to collect about your assets, it's really important to think about the different stakeholders of the assets. Now, there will be people within your organization scattered across different departments at different levels of seniority who will be requiring asset data for supporting their decisions and their actions. Now, on top of that, it is also important to think about who outside your organization will benefit from asset data. Think about your suppliers, your contractors, regulators, and of course, your customers as well. Now, you might sit back and think, customers, why customers, you may ask, why do they need asset data? Now, think about this. A simple thing like being able to provide advance warning of a power shutdown for maintenance, for example, or roadworks that you have planned at a particular location, this will enable your customers, your citizens in your city to plan and prepare for that event, reducing the inconvenience and the disturbance caused to their activities, right? So in a way, they also need asset data. But then keep in mind, not all stakeholders need all asset data, and certainly not at the same level of granularity. So understanding what data in what form each of your stakeholders need is really critical for developing an effective and efficient asset data system. So when thinking about what data to collect about your assets, it's often helpful to ask yourself, what do I need to know about my assets so that I can make my decisions effectively. And it's not just about yourself, it's about all the other stakeholders as well, as I said earlier. What do they need to know about their assets so they can make their decisions effectively? Now, if you don't think about the goal of data collection, you could end up collecting far too much data that you end up not knowing what to do with, or missing out on important pieces of data that will hamper your decision making. Now, in many advanced countries, we have started actually seeing the first problem. Companies are collecting vast amounts of data simply because they can. And what happens is that they end up drowning in the data, and they have no clear idea about what to use that data for, how to use that data. Now, obviously, this is a waste of resources, right? So obviously, always start with the objectives of your asset management process in mind when thinking about data collection. Now, on this slide, you will see the 6 W's that kind of help you think about what data needs to be collected. Now, the sharp-eyed people amongst you might notice that on the right-hand side box where I've listed the 6 W's, there are actually 7 bullet points. Now, what I've just done there is to split the what is the asset and where is it located, which is in the handbook, you will see that presented as a single bullet point. I've just split that out for clarity. So it's actually what we call the 6 W's. It serves as a very good reference point when you're embarking on that data journey. Now, this is by no means complete, but it's a good starting point. So in order to look after your assets properly, you need to know what is the asset, what is it called, where is it located, what is it worth, what is its condition, what is its remaining useful life, and so on and so forth. Which means for each of the asset, on the left-hand side box, you will see we need to get physical data about the asset. We should get the location data. We should get condition data, performance data, maintenance data, and financial data. Now, we will take a deeper look at what each of these data points mean throughout this workshop today as well as tomorrow. Right. So if we know the answers to these questions that we discussed in the previous slide, so that's in the middle box there, we can then make effective decisions about what should be fixed first, what assets should be fixed first, what are our most critical assets, which assets require better maintenance, what is our expenditure needs for renewal, replacement, and extension of our future assets, and so on. And which this will in turn result in you being able to meet your strategic organizational objectives better. It will improve customer satisfaction. It will result in better management of limited resources. And it will also improve the compliance of your organization with regulatory requirements as well. But remember what I said before, the starting point is always your decisions and action. And that's your middle box here. Starting with that needs, but exploring the needs of other stakeholders as well. First, understand what are the decisions to be made, work your way backwards to identify what do you need to know about each of your assets so that all stakeholders can make their decisions effectively. And finally, identify what data needs to be collected so that you know what you need to know. Okay. So effectively, what the asset management information system does, and asset information in general, it supports all parts of the asset management system, and it facilitates better coordination between them. Now, you might have seen this diagram in Linda's session in the first workshop as well, the overall picture of asset management. Now, you will soon notice that if you don't have good asset data, this whole asset management system will collapse. Without having good data, you will not be able to drive the inner processes of asset management effectively. Now let's look at some of the specific problems that you might face while collecting asset data. So now we are moving from talking about what data you might need to talking about specific qualities of asset data that you have to keep an eye on. So let me hear from you again, and this is going to be done through a breakout session. This will allow you to introduce each other and have a discussion amongst yourself, kind of sharing your headaches and your worries about asset data. What problems do you find with your data that you have on your assets in terms of collecting the data, in terms of managing the data, and so on? Have a discussion amongst yourself, and then we'll come back and share your thoughts. Mohan, do you want to guide the participants about what we are going to do next?
Yes, Sajid. Yeah, there will be a breakout rooms. We'll be entering into different rooms, and then let's introduce each other. Let's share our ideas. And basically, our question is like, what problems do you find with the data you have on your asset? So we have data, but still maybe we are not able to, I mean, use it or manage it. So I mean, we will be discussing on this and we'll present. Please put your name, go to the Google form, and then we'll share. Okay,
Is
let's
there
go
a
to the.
Google form for this, or is it a simple discussion amongst themselves?
It's a
Just
simple
to,
discussion.
yeah,
Yeah, I
it's a
think.
straightforward discussion, and then we'll come back for a discussion. We'll call on
Yeah,
some of the participants.
yes, it's a discussion only, and you can give your name if you want to present. Then we'll have a couple of presentations. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll spend around 10 minutes doing that. So we'll give you 10 minutes to have a discussion amongst yourself, and then we'll come back to the plenary to have a chat.
All right, people are sent to their breakout rooms already. If you don't find the notification to join a breakout room, you should be able to find it when you click breakout rooms or find it under more, right beside interpretations. Thank you, and see you back in 10 minutes.
Are we all back, Mona?
Yeah, welcome back everyone. I think we had a good discussion. I also visited some of your rooms, and then somebody has already raised hand. Let me give chance quickly. And Mohannath, I think Mohannath is from Saudi Arabia, right? Mohannath, over to you. Please unmute yourself and speak.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. In Rome 2, we have came up with 4 issues that we face. We think we face with regards to asset data. Those are the first one is about the data accuracy. So we think that one of the issues we are facing currently is the accuracy and the completeness of data of the asset. Also, we have talked about the accessibility and how easy to get to this asset data. So we have the accuracy and the completeness, accessibility, and finally the way we manage the updates on asset data. So we came up with those 4 issues. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Mohannath. Very good response. Like accuracy, completeness, accessibility. That's the really, good issues we have. I'd like to call one more participant, Bhumika Bas. Could you please unmute yourself and speak, Bhumika? Okay, till Bhumika is ready, maybe anybody wants to volunteer? I see a hand raised. Sriram and Arif. First, Sriram, please unmute yourself.
Okay, I want to add one point that we discussed in our breakout room. In addition to other consistency and quality, accuracy of the data, one more point, that is regularity, or let's say regularity in the time scale period, that also should be maintained, and it's a problem in most of developing countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, so on. I want to address this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sriram. Yeah, it's very true. Regularity is an issue in our side. We may have very good data sometime, and sometime we have we may not have that better record. Another Arif Sahid. Could you please unmute?
Yes, thank you, Dhakal. And in addition to this, actually, I like to supplement some of the points in addition to my previous two speaker. We found actually, I'm going to represent in group number 12, and on behalf of the group number 12, I'd like to say that we feel this actually the time frame is the very critical. So if you take too many time to collect the data and cannot produce within the stipulated time, and then that would be actually useless. So maintain that time frame and other things is very critical for collection of the data. And another aspect is actually we know that the garbage in and garbage out, that is the word actually we know that if there is no validation tier and someone actually collecting data, there are other group of responsibilities that they can validate the data. If there is no validation, so there will be a chance to get a wrong data and make a plan, actually then planning and everything will be wrong. So validation is very critical in terms of data. That there should be some good actually transparent system should be in place, so we can actually know that actually the correct data is coming and correctly, and that is going to be used for the planning. Another is actually the financial involvement. Data is actually we have to be thinking about it, that actually if the data collection is worthy or not. If it's what data we are collecting that is not worthy compared to the investment, we need to invest to collect the data, then it is not too wise to use. So that is the things we have to apply when we collect the data. These are the three things I like to share.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Thank you, Arif. It's really, a good point you raised. Next, Ugoji, please unmute yourself. Yeah, maybe let's wrap up. We got very good points from some of the speakers. Hope you had a very good discussion. Over to you, Ajit. Let's move on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This was really a great discussion. I feel that you're all very good experts in data and data management and data quality already. So this, instead of me providing.
Hello, sorry, I muted myself.
Sorry. Sorry, if you don't mind, we'll carry on, so we can catch up with time. I'm sure we'll get another opportunity to hear from you. So I was just going to say that instead of this lecture, we should have all just had a good discussion, and all these points would have that I was going to talk about would have come up. So we will talk about these individual data quality parameters that you all talked about in detail in the next part of this session. But again, before we go on to that, and based on all the discussions that you've had with all your colleagues, all the complaining that you just had about the problems that you're facing with poor data quality, I just want to get a feel. If I say the word data quality, what is the first word that comes to your mind? Now, we know that we don't have perfect data. We have all sorts of problems with our data, but we also know that similar to the way in which the quality of products that a company makes or the quality of service that our infrastructure provides, the quality of data that we collect about our assets is also critical. So I want to hear from you, what is the first word that comes to your mind when you think about data quality? So let's go to that Menti poll and do a very quick and it's going to come up as a word cloud as you enter your responses. What is the first word that comes to your mind when you think about data quality? So you've had a very good discussion so far.
Yeah, I hope you clicked on the chat box, got the link, and then yeah,
relevance.
Answers are coming. Lot of answers. Accuracy is on the top. Reliability, data valuation. Yeah, valuation is coming, like as a good asset representation. Accuracy again. Completeness, yeah, incomplete data doesn't help. So completeness is coming up. Accuracy, reliability, yeah, relevant information. Reliable again, reliability. Accuracy is, completeness. Yeah, let's stop. Maybe over to you, Ajit. Thank you.
Yeah, I will take it back. Now, when I share my screen, I promise you I did not prepare this screen on the basis of your responses. This was a pre-prepared screen. And this is what I thought your response is going to be, accuracy. So wherever I run this workshop, this is the response that I get. The first word that comes to people's mind is the accuracy of data. But what we'll see, and what we have discussed already as well, and from the cloud poll that we just saw, accuracy is not the only thing that you need to be concerned about when you're thinking about data quality. There are other dimensions of data quality as well. So data quality is actually more than just accuracy. So let's look at some of the critical ones in addition to data quality, data accuracy. We all have a good idea of what data accuracy means. Data accuracy is about how close the data reflects reality. Now you can see in this picture, the picture, it's clear that it's very cold. Someone has made a snowman, but the thermometer there is saying 35 degrees centigrade. So obviously the thermometer is not accurate, right? Now, poor accuracy can arise due to a variety of different issues. Now, there could be some accidental errors that happen when you're capturing and recording data, but sometimes these errors can be intentional as well. Now, it could be that someone has made a wrong entry, intentionally made a wrong entry, perhaps because if they had made the correct entry, it might put some blame on them for not looking after their assets properly or something like that. So it can be accidental errors or intentional errors. Now, it is essential to make sure, for instance, that any instruments that we use for collecting data, they are checked for accuracy and they're calibrated. Now, good ways to avoid data recording problems in terms of accuracy is, of course, through automation. If you can avoid manual input, that is great, but that is not always possible, and it's often expensive to go for automation or automated ways of capturing data as well. So you can avoid those entry errors that people make if we go for automation. But if you have to use manual input, proper training of the people who are responsible for collecting data and proper motivation of employees is really critical for capturing the right data, the accurate data, as accurate as you can. Okay, so what we'll be going through is to really kind of understand why we might face these data quality problems and what we can do to kind of alleviate these data quality problems. So next up is completeness. Now we discussed this, some of you had talked about completeness of data as well. Often the data that you have is incomplete. You don't have all the data. I'm sure you've all come across missing data points in your data set when someone has either forgotten to make an entry or the relevant data was not available at the point of recording. Now, on the flip side, as we discussed earlier, you might also be faced with an excessive amount of data as well, data that is unnecessary, and we classify that into the data completeness category as well. At the very least, this excessive data can be a burden in terms of cost and other resources, but at the worst, it can result in confusion and lack of clarity as well. So careful identification of your data requirements and an effective plan, and I think someone mentioned having a good plan, is really important to capture the data and ensure the completeness of data. Next up is the issue of timeliness, and I think someone talked about the updated, having the data up to date, and that is exactly this issue of timeliness, data that is out of date. Now, this can often come across as an accuracy issue, but the root cause of this data quality problem is different to the accuracy problem. Now, this problem happens, the timeliness problem happens when the changing nature of your assets is not captured in a timely manner. Now, in order to get your data to be timely, it is important to understand the rate at which specific aspects of your assets, for example, condition of your assets, change, so that you can ensure that you're recording the data at an appropriate frequency. If the condition is deteriorating rapidly, you might need more frequent inspections to really capture the progression of the deterioration. If the condition is happening very slowly, then you can afford to have less frequent inspections. Now, timeliness can also happen due to delays that are caused due to your information management processes as well, and especially if the changes out there in the real world is happening too quickly. Now, an example could be a bad weather event, such as a flood in Bangladesh or an earthquake in Nepal. Things evolve so rapidly that your data management processes cannot keep pace with the changes. So data can get quickly out of date because of all these delays. Now, these delays can happen between the actual event that is happening out in the real world, the point at which you collect the data, the point in time at which the data is then recorded, the time when it was retrieved and ultimately used. So if you think about the whole information chain, delays can happen anywhere in this information chain, and it can make data out of date by the time someone uses it. So it's really important for you to understand what is that information chain or the data chain from the point of the actual event to the point of actual use. What are the different steps involved? How can we actually understand the delays involved in each of these steps and take measures to reduce the delays or eliminate those delays in the data processing chain? So that's timeliness. Next up, I think, again, someone mentioned consistency of data as well. So you say tomato, I might say tomato. Someone might say it is a channel. Someone might say it's a drain. Someone might say it's an elevator. Someone might say, call it a lift. Some might say to repair this pump, it is going to take half a day. Now, when you say half a day, what do you exactly mean? Do you mean 4 hours because a working day is 8 hours long? Or do you mean 12 hours because a full day is 24 hours? So when you're recording asset data, it's important to follow nationally or at least locally agreed standards so we all know what we are talking about. So have a consistent way of representing data in our system. Now, this consistency could be in terms of terminology, in terms of units of data, or even in what the assets are actually called. So having that standard and having an understanding of what that standard way of representing data is really critical. So everyone captures data in a consistent manner. So two people collecting data, you will come up with the same answer. Okay, right. Now we are living in a digital world. Now, because we are aware of the risks in having data, we are truly so, and rightly so, we are worried about data security. Now, in our efforts to make sure that our data is stored in a secure manner, we also have to ensure that the right people are given access to the right data at the right time. Now, you might all be managing a complex portfolio of different types of assets and systems, and asset data is likely to be stored in different locations, different documents, different files and systems, and so on. Now, decision makers and the different stakeholders involved in the asset, they need to have a very clear idea about what data is held where and how to access it, so that they need to be enabled with that access as well. Now, I've heard of so many stories of site surveys and inspections being done over and over again because the data is there, but it is misplaced, or different people don't have the access to that survey result, or even didn't know that these surveys or inspections had taken place. Now, so understanding who the stakeholders of your assets are, understanding what data they need is critical to ensure that you're providing the right level of access to them. Again, the messaging is coming back to the same thing. You need to know what your assets are. You need to know who your stakeholders are. You need to know what data they need, so you can ensure that the right quality of data is there in your systems. So what we are saying is that data quality is not just about accuracy. It is not just about having accurate data in your systems. There are a number of different issues that you need to consider when you're capturing and managing data. We have discussed a few dimensions of data quality, completeness, the timeliness, and so on. But you can think of a wider range of characteristics. And I think you come up with a lot of examples of different dimensions of data quality as well. So here I've got a few more examples of data quality. Someone mentioned data should be cost effective to capture and store. So that is a really important data quality as well. Is the data objective or is it subjective? Is the data secured or stored in a secure manner? So there is a wide range of data quality dimensions that is useful to keep in mind when we are thinking about data collection. So it's not just about what data to collect, it's about that quality of data that really drives effective asset management processes. So ultimately, given said all this, there is one critical thing to understand. Data quality is the data being fit for use. Now, it's not always about having 100% accuracy or always it being really real time. It's about whether the data is really fit for use or not. And really, also I remember that there are, as I said before, keep on repeating, number of different stakeholders or users of this asset data. And keep in mind that one person's good enough quality might not be good enough for another person. So you need to really understand what different people need in terms of the granularity of the data and the quality of data they need for making decisions. But the key thing, again, repeat, it is not always about having 100% accuracy. You might think, okay, I want to have all my data 100% accurate and 100% timely and so on, but you will end up spending far too much money in getting the data completely accurate. So understand what is good enough. What is that data quality that will make it fit for use, and stop worrying about data quality and carry on with your asset management practices. So that was taking you through a few data quality dimensions. Now I want to get your feel about what do you think is the problems that you could face if you don't have good quality data. So what are the risks involved in having poor quality data? What is the impact of poor quality data? Again, let's go to Mentimeter and enter up to 3 responses to this question. Mohan, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Ajit. Please click on the chat box, the Mentimeter, and put your responses, up to 3 responses, please.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we talked about poor. What are the problems with data earlier? Now we are talking about, if you have that inaccurate data, what problem would you actually face in your business?
Yeah, what happens if we have a very poor quality data? Yeah, good one. Poor maintenance. Yeah, it will not be reliable. So, wrong management plan. Very true. Faulty plans. Yeah, it will affect our decision making. Waste of budget. Yeah. Miscalculation of resources. If we don't have good data, we'll not have good calculations, inaccuracy of data. Okay, inaccurate decisions, increase of accident, the good one. So it doesn't solve the problem in asset management. That's very true. Yeah, answers are coming. Maybe over to you, Ajit. We can carry on.
Okay, I think you've got the right message. Thanks a lot, Mohan, for taking us through this. So yes, if you have poor quality data, it can lead to a number of different problems. So let's look at what these problems might be. So let me make sure that you're seeing my screen. Can you see my screen at all?
No, Ajit. Yeah.
What about now? Okay, great. So what are the different problems you might face if you have poor quality data? Now, you might not realize this, that you might think that having good quality data is going to be expensive. It's going to be a costly process. But what you also have to realize is that there are a lot of risks that you face if you have poor quality data. As I described before, if you don't have the right data in the right place, you will end up spending a lot of time and resources just searching for the data. And I'm sure you might have experienced this in your own work life. You spend so much time searching for the right kind of records for different kind of your equipment. You want to send some personnel for repairing a particular piece of equipment, a pump or something, and you want to look at give the operating manual or the maintenance manual to this maintenance operator. You can't just find it. You keep searching for it, or you go and contact the manufacturer of the pump. Can we get the maintenance manual or the operating manual, please? And all this it's going to end up in a lot of time and resources and money being wasted. So if you have the good data, the good quality data, complete data in the right place with proper access given to the proper people, you will not have to spend time searching for data. And of course, some of you have already explained it in the Menti poll. Poor quality data leads to wrong decisions. You will end up with the wrong maintenance plans, you will end up with the wrong inspection plans, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the problems we also face is if some of the data that you hold is of poor quality, what ends up happening is that people quickly lose trust in the data. So even the data that is of good quality, people just end up not trusting it, because some data in your database is inaccurate or incomplete. You just completely don't trust whatever data you have. And what that means is, again, you end up not either not ending up using the data that you have, or again go and collect the data all over again. Even though the data that you had was correct, you end up collecting the data again because you just don't believe in it. You've had some bad experiences with poor quality data. Now you don't trust the database. Yeah, so you end up repeating the data collection exercise, which basically means that when you're doing this, you're diverting those resources from other tasks. Now, this is an unnecessary exercise. You had the good data in place, but you end up repeating this data collection exercise because you did not have good trust in the data that you have. So first off, if you clean up your database and have that good system in place, people will start building trust in your data systems and will start using that data and then make effective decisions using that data as well. So hopefully this part of the session has given you some clarity about what data to collect, what the importance of different data quality dimensions are, and given you an appreciation of the problems you might face if you have poor data quality. So what we will do now is to have a quick break. We have been spending quite a lot of time in front of our computers and laptops and phones over the last few half an hour, 45 minutes. Now we'll take a 5-minute coffee break, stretch your legs. But we've also got an exercise for you. Mohan, do you want to introduce the innovative coffee break idea that we are introducing here? Or it's okay. I can introduce the coffee break as well. So either you can step away from the screen, stretch your legs, get a cup of coffee, or we are also going to put you in breakout rooms. So it can be like a real world conference where you use your break times to meet each other, catch up with each other, and exchange contact details and so on. But if you are really lacking the motivation to do that, we've got a fun activity here as well. You might use this time to discuss this question that we have put. If you could be anywhere in this world right now, where would you be? That could be the icebreaker question that you can start discussing. So we'll come back in 5 minutes after this break. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome back. Let's get on with our workshop. Right, let me set my slides up here. Hopefully you had a reasonably good break. Hopefully you had a good chat with your fellow participants as well and explored that question about where you would be ideally if you were given a choice. So just coming back to our session to recap, so far we have looked at the importance of asset data. We have discussed a systematic way of thinking about identifying what data you need to collect about your assets and why. We also learned that it is important to think about the quality of data that we capture about our assets and the different dimensions of data quality that could be important as well. So in this part of the session, we will be learning a systematic way to set up an asset information management system. So my thinking is that this part of the session is going to be quite new to all of you, whereas the earlier part of the session really kind of reiterated the problems that you were having and reiterated some of the aspects of data quality that you were probably already aware of. Now, I don't like to start off on a negative note, but I have to be really honest here. Developing a good asset information system is not going to be easy. It will be a resource-intensive process, and there will be a lot of people involved. It is going to take time. It's not going to be happening over a 1-month period or over a 3-month period. It's going to take time. But don't be put off by that. A lot can be done with limited financial and human resources. But if the people involved show genuine long-term commitment, so that's really, really important. That long-term commitment is really important. Even small initial steps, they can yield enormous payoffs, but that commitment is really, really important. So when developing an asset information system, it's really important that you select and adopt information processes that are suitable for the requirements of your own local government or your local your own utility, your organization. Now, there is a wide range of asset management information systems that are available, asset management software that is available, but having good information and business processes is really critical. Simply by having a piece of software cannot replace good processes. A lot of companies launch into this by buying some major piece of software, some IT system, thinking that it's going to solve all their problems. Wrong. The solution to having good asset data and good asset management is having efficient and effective processes in place. Business processes, good processes in place. The software can then be used to support that good practices, that good processes. So keep that in mind. Having good asset data is not just about getting a good asset data management system. Okay. Now, at the beginning, your asset information management system can be simply based on an asset register that can help you build a record of all your assets and help identify the assets that are deteriorating. At a more advanced level, this can be more comprehensive, and it can even include decision support tools that show you when to renew, replace, or acquire new assets. So some of these tools can even give you the optimal answer for maintenance intervals and so on. But the key message here is to start small, get the basics right, don't overcomplicate things. As you build your confidence, add more sophisticated capabilities as your budget and your skills allow. So once you start doing this, you will soon start realizing the benefits of good information management systems quite quickly. You will see that a good system will support effective collection, processing, and presentation of data. You will have a better understanding of your assets. You will be able to maintain your assets better, and you will be able to learn from your asset failures better as well. So such a system will ensure that the right information goes to the right people for efficient decision making. And it will also improve compliance with regulatory or government requirements as well. So before going into that process of setting up an asset information management system, I want to get your views. What do you think is the first step? So when you're just about to embark on that journey of setting up that asset data management system, what should be the first step that you take? So let's go to this Menti poll and just enter a single response there. Mohan, if you can take us through the results of the Menti poll, that'll be great.
Yes, colleagues, let's click on the chat box and go to the Mentimeter. Yeah, first step in setting up an asset information system. So we may have been experiencing in our countries, in our municipalities and local government and central government, a lot of operation and maintenance systems and assets record system and all. Yeah, results are coming up. Development of assets profile, identification, gather available data, data collection, stakeholder engagement, lot of management part is coming up, reliable and updated data information, team building, that's very important, solid base system, cloud based. Okay, we're going to high tech. That's our dream actually. Gap analysis, lot of things coming up. Yeah, while results are coming up, maybe over to you, Ajit, to explain more.
Yeah, thank you. All of them are reasonable results, but I can see some people have, one of you have mentioned team building, and another person has mentioned manpower. Congratulations, that is the right answer. So we do need to think a bit systematically when we are thinking about setting up an asset management system, asset information management system. And you're right, the first thing that often comes to your mind is, yes, we are talking about asset data, so let's go and start collecting data. Not really. Let's be really systematic about this. And what we will do over the next few slides is to take you through this systematic 7-step process that we have outlined in the handbook. At this point, I will just encourage you again, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the handbook, please do download the handbook, and I'm sure someone can share the link to the handbook on the Zoom chat. And that handbook really clearly explains all these things that we are taking you through this workshop in a much more detailed manner. So coming back to the setting up of the asset management information system, be systematic is the thing that I'm going to really emphasize. So the first step, as at least a couple of you have mentioned, is to assemble a good team. You need to have the right people in place, first of all. Get the right people, get a good leader for the team, and connect the team with the key stakeholders, and that's really critical for success. And I think one of the participants also mentioned getting stakeholder or leadership approval, something like that. That's really critical. This asset management information team, it should consist of perhaps local government officials and potentially even outside experts and stakeholders as well. But each of these team members in the asset management information team, they should be assigned with a clear list of duties and responsibilities. And we'll go through that in a bit more detail. So this team should be tasked with defining the data requirements for your assets and helping with implementation of those requirements, and also providing training to others on the use and the regular update of this asset database. So this team is really responsible for the asset data in your organization. Now, I understand that not all government officials will have enough technical knowledge in data management, and of course that is not necessary. Where required, the team must engage other resources necessary for proper data collection, such as colleagues with relevant expertise and technical equipment, and so on. Now, on this screen here, you can see a general organizational chart of an asset management information team. Now, you can see here that the chart includes an asset management champion, asset information management champion, and this asset information management champion is positioned between the senior public officials, such as mayors, and the departmental staff. Now, this is very similar to the organizational chart that you perhaps have seen in the earlier workshop as well, which showed you what the asset management team should look like. Now, you might be thinking, do I need to create an entirely new team with newly recruited people and so on for data management? Actually, no. Actually, doing that might even be counterproductive, because you are not really utilizing the vast knowledge that you might have in your existing team. So what you can do is you can actually take your existing asset management team and expand the role of the members of that team to include additional responsibilities related to data management. Now, you might then want to think about expanding that team a bit further by adding new team members whose involvement is necessary. For example, a senior IT manager who traditionally might not have had a place in your asset management team. Now, given that we have very limited resources and these people that you have in your team, they might have other things to do as well. We must ensure that you don't engage relevant staff beyond that what is minimally required to be an effective team. Now, here's the important thing, and I'll say this right at the start. You must not look at this whole asset management, asset data management process as just another project. We should look at the development of an asset management information system as a new and improved process of managing asset data on a regular basis. So this must be the new business as usual, not just a project with a start point and an end point in mind. Yeah, once you have the right data in place, it has to be an ongoing process. So let's look at the role of the information management champion, because this champion's role is really important. So we'll spend some time going through this in a bit of depth. So this information management champion, this person is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day aspects of implementing the asset management information system, and this champion is responsible for motivating the team's collective efforts as well. Now, if your government has the capacity, it should nominate someone from the technical ranks to fill this role. Since this work is going to be done mostly at a technical level, this person should ideally have an engineering or operational background, and hopefully some familiarity with general accounting and financial concepts as well. Now, I know this might be hard to find a person with an engineering background with some financial knowledge as well, but that's okay. Perhaps a bit of training is necessary to fill in the gaps in knowledge. But essentially what we are looking for is an all-rounded person to be the information management champion. Now, this champion should be given direct access to political and administrative leadership of the organization, because this team's initial task is going to be to mobilize resources and securing buy-in from the senior officials in the local government or the organization. Now, the head of the local government or the organization should give really strong political support or support otherwise to the champion, and help ensure that the team is able to fulfill its responsibilities and help and achieve its goal and objectives. Now, one of the problems they might face right at the start is, how do you overcome the inertia of political opposition, bureaucrats and union families and so on? Because what we are suggesting here is a change in the way you're doing things, and nobody likes change, right? So you might face a lot of opposition in when you're embarking on this journey. The solution here to all this opposition is to engage with them, not to fight, but to engage with them. Explain the problems that you're facing due to poor data quality in a language that actually matters to these people who are opposing the change that you're proposing. For instance, now this might sound a bit funny, politicians are worried about their voter base, right? So talking about asset data and how poor quality data might be affecting their voters might help you in getting them on your side. Unions, on the other hand, they might be worried about how this might affect jobs. Are you going to bring in a lot of automation and take away the jobs for our people? Are we going to lose our jobs because of all your fancy asset management concepts? No, right? And you need to be really clear about this. You need to be clear about how having better data will help people do their jobs better and more efficiently, and how having good data will also result in a safe workplace. So come up with these arguments, think from their point of view, and think about how you can get them on your side, instead of just getting into an argument and a fight about how this is really important for everything and so on. Okay. So we talked about the asset management champion. Now let's look at the team members as well. Now these team members should also be generally drawn from technical, operational, and service departments, so they know what they're doing, they know the assets, they know how the system works, and they can effectively support the data management processes and help with the change management aspects as well. Now, by talking to different stakeholders, this team will help define the specific data required for decision making for each of the departments. The team will then need to agree on a structure for the asset management information system and put a governance structure around this as well. So who are the people who are responsible for managing different bits of data? Who's responsible for different bits of data? Individual team members will all have clearly assigned tasks and work streams and so on, and they should all demonstrate a commitment to supporting the effective asset management information system and the process. The successful development and implementation of this asset management information system, it requires that sustained commitment of all the team members as well as the decision makers. Okay, so that's step one, setting up a good team, having a good information management champion. That's step one. Now let's go on to step two. After you set up your information team, you're ready to start capturing data. But first thing first, you need to know what assets you have, right? Now, this might sound simple, but it's a fundamental thing that many organizations do not have a clear idea of. I talk to organizations in the UK as well and other parts of the world, and many people don't know what assets they actually have in place. Now, if you don't know what you need to manage, you obviously can't manage them properly, right? So what you need to do is you need to create an asset register that contains the basic data about the asset. Now, first off, every asset should be given an identity, possibly a unique identification number or a code. Now, if possible, you should physically tag the asset with the identification number. Now, some organizations, they simply use a sticker that has got a number on it. Some use some more sophisticated things like barcodes or QR codes that can be read by scanners and mobile phones. Now, whatever you use, it is useful to use a systematic approach for creating a good identification system that is meaningful, and it makes searching for associated data easier. Now, we are going to talk about asset hierarchies next, and it is useful to think about creating a hierarchical asset identification system. Now, in addition to the ID number, you should also have some basic useful data about your asset in your asset register. What is the asset? When was it built? When was it installed? Who is the manufacturer? What is its value? And so on. On top of that, there's some other pieces of data that you might want to also collect for driving good investment and maintenance decisions. So this includes what is the current condition of the asset? What was the historical condition of the asset? Now, if you have a historical record of condition, you will be able to understand how fast is the asset deteriorating, and hence when is it likely to this particular asset will need some intervention. Now, this can be informed in the form of good inspection records, clearly captured inspection records. What intervention actions can be taken on the asset, and how much would each of these intervention actions, these maintenance action cost? What is the current performance level? What is the historical performance level? How fast is the performance of the asset degrading? What is the impact of failure? If this asset fails, what is the impact of that failure on the level of service? And of course, what is the probability of failure, asset failure over time? Now, you might think that all of this different pieces of asset data might not be recorded as part of a single database or a document. It might be recorded in different databases. So your asset register might be on an Excel file, your condition monitoring and your inspection records might be in a maintenance management system or some other file because that is being done by some other department. That's fine, as long as the relevant data the data relevant to an asset is linked to that asset identifier, and there is a clear knowledge about what data lies where, it should be fine. Yeah, and that's why the asset identifier is important, especially because data is split across different data systems and so on. That asset identifier kind of forms a link to all these different pieces of data. So I talked about asset hierarchy in the previous slide. So what is an asset hierarchy? Now, the asset hierarchy is a logical way of representing a complex asset system by breaking it down into its different parts. Now, here on this slide, we have an example of a water distribution system, which is broken down into its components. Primarily, in this example, it is broken down into the sources and the distribution system. And the distribution system is further broken down into pipes, valves, etc., and so on and so forth. So that's what I meant by an asset hierarchy. Now, the design of this asset hierarchy, it should be informed by how you intend to use your asset information. Now, you will need to decide the number of levels in your asset hierarchy and hence the data hierarchy as well, and the type of data that you will be collecting at each level of the asset hierarchy. Now, no matter what the breakdown, your database should use a consistent methodology for all your assets. So that's the most important thing. Be consistent in the way you are creating the asset hierarchy. Now, data collection can be a rather expensive and a time-consuming process, as I said earlier. So you should really carefully consider the scope and detail of the data that you need in your asset register database. Not every asset system has to be represented down to an atomic level, to the nuts and bolts, nor is it practical to do so. As I said before, you should always have that end purpose in mind when you're thinking about asset data. So you should carefully think about what is the what should be the lowest level of your hierarchy. It's often useful to think about what's your smallest maintenance managed item. What can be considered an asset and what is simply a spare part. So in a water distribution system, for example, a pump might be considered an asset that you may maintain and manage, but the bearing or the filter of the pump is simply a spare part. So the filter and the bearing is not an asset, and hence it will not appear in your asset hierarchy. Another example is you might consider a vehicle as an asset, but not its tire. The tire is not going to appear in your hierarchy. The vehicle is going to appear in your hierarchy. The vehicle is the asset that has got the value associated with it. The rest of it are the spare parts associated with that asset. So be careful and think clearly about don't overdo this development of the asset hierarchy. Otherwise, you might spend far too much time collecting far too detailed data that you might not end up using. Now, this principle of information roll up and roll down, it makes it easier to appreciate how creating an asset hierarchy is going to be helpful. Now, let's imagine that a particular sewer, let's call it sewer main B, as you can see in the slide. Now, if the stuff in the slide, if the material in the slide seems to be too small for you to read and so on, just again, don't worry. All of this is in very clear detail in the handbook. So I will encourage you to go back to the handbook and take a look and take a read of the handbook. So coming back to our sewer main, let's say there is something wrong with this sewer main, the sewer main B. Now, your government is not going to be alerted each time a sewer main is faulty, but it needs to know that the overall functioning of this particular sanitation system is disrupted, right? Now, this is the idea of information roll-up. If your asset database is organized in a hierarchical structure, it will aggregate this information about sanitation systems of components and so on, including our sewer main B, and it will help highlight that this particular sanitation system in this particular town or super town is disrupted. So that's one way around. Let's imagine the other way around. So let's imagine that we know, all we know that is that this sanitation system is disrupted, maybe due to customer complaints. Now, for the person who has to go and fix this problem, knowing the location and other data about the sewer that has caused the problem is going to be useful, right? So the maintenance engineer will want to know what the problem is, what the location of the sewer main is, and so on, so that it can be fixed very quickly. Again, if your database is organized in a hierarchical manner, you can drill down from the sanitation system to access the micro level information about the sewer main that is faulty and can pinpoint the exact issue that requires attention. So this is the idea of information roll down, or navigating from a macro level to the data on the system's subcomponents. So having this hierarchical asset register database, it will allow you to abstract from or zoom out or dig into or zoom into the details of asset systems or service areas, depending on who is using the information and for what purpose. The more organized your asset database is, the more efficient the searching and querying for the data is going to be. And we'll go through a few examples, and I'll let you have an exercise to do it on yourself as well in developing a hierarchy. So once you have a general idea of what information you would like to capture, you can then begin to list down the services provided through your asset systems, the assets required for providing those services, and so on. So from this list, you can try and map out where each component in your asset portfolio would fall in that hierarchical structure, following that logical parent-child relationship in order of significance in terms of asset components. Now, you might realize that this is very similar to the way that you organize your work breakdown structures, or even folders and subfolders in your computers and so on. So this idea of hierarchy should be familiar to you already. But the key thing here is that you should develop a hierarchy that works for you and is meaningful you and for your organization. It's really important to take the time to get this right at the start, because once you have developed your asset hierarchy and once you've organized your data alongside that hierarchy, it's going to be hard to change it later. So get it right the first time. Now, the figure on the right gives an example of what part of an asset register hierarchy might look like for a sanitation system example that we discussed earlier. Now, we'll, as I said before, we'll run an exercise in a bit in which you will be able to use these concepts yourself as well. And this exercise will then extend into your homework as well. So once you have organized your assets and systems into this hierarchical structure, you have that skeleton for your asset register database. Well, I'll come back to this issue of asset identification that we talked about earlier. When I talked about the idea of asset identification, I said that it will be a good idea to create a hierarchical asset identification system. So let's look at how we can actually do that. As I said before, every asset captured should have that ID that should be labeled or physically tagged with a unique identification or a name. Now, when you're looking for specific information about an asset, such as its location, condition, finances, or maintenance schedule, for example, this ID, as I said before, will help you record and continuously update the data about this asset over time. Since the data is pulled from different departments, the ID will help you to pull this data together in one place. Any updates to the asset's primary data can be recorded and linked through this ID. So in this example, we have taken an example of ventilators. Now we're all still in the throes of the COVID pandemic, so ventilators is a good example to take. So here we have a systematic hierarchical asset identification system that ends with this specific type of ventilators called Drago ventilators. So we've given this asset subtype, Drago ventilators, an ID DV7.1.1.5, and individual ventilators of this type will have a unique identification number that comes after this as well. Now, Drago ventilators fall under a more general category of ventilators. Now, here we have given ventilators a couple of letters VT, and its identification number is 7.1.1. Now, all ventilators are part of equipment, and here we call equipment EQ, and the equipment's identification is 7.1, and so on. And the hospital that owns this equipment is HOS 7.1, whereas other hospitals will also have that HOS label, and so on and so forth. So hopefully this example shows you an idea of how we can actually create a hierarchical asset identification system that is going to be useful for you. So if you need to know how much money have you been spending on spares and maintenance for this particular ventilator, all you have to do is to look up this ID, and all the relevant records for this ventilator will be linked to this ID, and you can see that. Similarly, if you want to know how much money you have been spending on all ventilators, you just have to look up 7.1.1, and it will instantly tell you. Of course, it will instantly tell you if your data follows this hierarchical structure. If it doesn't follow the hierarchical structure, it will take a lot of time to actually search for this data and pull all this data together and get that information that you need. How much money have you been spending? So that's an example of how a systematic asset identification system can be developed based on your asset hierarchy. But ultimately, you should choose a system that works for you, but need to ensure that once you choose a system, it is implemented uniformly across all your assets. So don't just have an asset identification system that works for the healthcare system, another type of asset identification system for your water distribution system, another type of asset identification for your road network, and so on. Be consistent in your hierarchy, be consistent in the way you identify your assets as well. So just to recap, the benefits of a systematic approach to asset data management is that it will help you create consistent definitions of your assets. It will help you map the relationship between the assets in your database. It will help you identify the line of dependencies between services, categories, and assets, and so on. It will increase the reliability and accuracy of data, because now you have got that systematic identifier system that helps pull all this data together. And hence it also facilitates effective analysis, planning, and decision making at all levels of our organization. Okay, so that's about creating an asset hierarchy and creating a hierarchical asset identification system. Now what we will do is we will give you an individual exercise to do. So we will spend the next 10 to 15 minutes taking you through this exercise. So Mohan, do you want to introduce this exercise to the people through the Google Forms? So essentially what you need to do is to come up, think about an asset that or a system that you own, and come up with a simple hierarchy for that system. Mohan, I'll hand over to you to take them through the Google Forms and take them through the exercise.
Yeah, thank you, Ajit. Yeah, hope you click on the chat box and go into the Google form. Yeah, please put your name and email.
Sorry, Mohan, it might be useful if you share your screen while you talk them through the Google form. It might help them figure out what they need to do. The last time the form was a bit confusing. Hopefully it's clearer now.
I can share the screen for Mohan so he
There we
can
go.
run through it. Hang on.
Yeah. Hope you reached there. You see the category wise, hierarchical system for the sewerage system. Category 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like that, you
So just to be clear, what you need to do here is to think about an asset that is important to you, and go down one branch of that hierarchy. This is just an initial exercise for you to get used to thinking about your assets in a hierarchical fashion. So what would you fill in as your priority asset system? So the first thing in your hierarchy. Within that hierarchy, so what would be a service function for that asset system that you would note down as a second level in your hierarchy. And then you go down, what would be one type of an asset within that hierarchy. So just provide one answer, but it is just to get your mind thinking in that hierarchical fashion. And what I'm also interested in, when you come back from the breakout session, the individual exercise, when you discuss your responses, is your thought on what should be the smallest level in which you'll break down the hierarchy of that of the system of your choice. And it will be good to have a discussion around where do you start from and where do you end with in your asset hierarchy. Okay, hopefully that is clear, and at least some of you might start doing it now. And when we start seeing the responses, things will be really clear for everyone. So I'll be back in 10 minutes to discuss your responses. Right. I have a feeling that you're a bit confused about the exercise, and not many answers are coming through the Google Forms. So I talked through one example of a water distribution system that can be broken down into its sources and distribution. The distribution system can be further broken down into pipes or pumps and so on. If I take another example, a transportation system, so you start off with the transportation system. A subsystem for that would be the rail transport, and a part of the rail transport could be a route between one city to another, and an asset within that route could be a track or a signal, right? So those are a couple of examples, and I want you to think about the system that you are responsible for, and to create a very simple a one-level hierarchy based on your system. So I think either you're unable to think of the hierarchy, or you are able to actually do it, but something is wrong from our end, from a technical point of view, and we are not seeing the responses. It could be either way, but hopefully you are able to do this.
Maybe somebody can raise hand and share the ideas if it's not coming up to the Google form.
Yeah, if it is not coming up on Google Forms, why don't we just, Mohan, if you can call on people, there are several people who have raised their hands. They can just talk through their responses. This is not rocket science, so they can just talk through their responses.
Yeah, I can see Sriramji. Sriram, maybe please unmute and speak. Then Mohan Nath, then Arif Bhai again. Sriram, please.
I can now. I submitted the response. I don't know if it appeared there or not.
Then there may be a technical issue on our end. Sorry about that. Why don't you talk us through your example?
I chose level 1 priority asset system as a closed series. There can be open or closed series system. So I chose closed series system. Out of that, one asset category is combined storm water sludge system. Some technical
Fine, go ahead.
Can be excluded or included in that series system. So I chose combined stormwater sludge system. And one type of that asset within that category, I chose collection units. For the other question, the smallest unit, I chose manhole. So like this, I have completed the form.
Yeah, thank you, Sriramji. Yeah, he gave a several system example. Now, Mohan Nath, please, your experience from Saudi Arabia. Mohan Nath, please unmute yourself.
Yes, hello again. For me, I chose the power generation system. So this is the asset system. And for the category, I selected the generator. Then under that system, there would be the cranking system. And the smallest level will be the battery. Thank you.
Can you repeat that again? What would be the smallest level?
The battery.
The battery. Okay. So a response that I would have for that is, again, for different organizations, this would be handled in a different way. But do think about this, whether a battery can be considered as an asset, or whether battery is a spare part for that for the asset that is higher up in the hierarchy. So whether you might want to actually think of having detailed info. So remember, if you have an asset represented in your asset hierarchy, you're going to be capturing a lot of data about that asset. So if it is meaningful for you to have a battery as your asset in your asset register, then perhaps so, but many other organizations might think that battery is a spare part for the asset that it belongs to. So think about that a bit carefully, okay? So that you don't go on overdrive in collecting data.
Yeah, thank you, Ajit. Very good clarification. We can move to Birendra Kumar ji. Please unmute yourself.
Hey, good afternoon, sir.
No, well, it's early morning. It's 6 o'clock here.
Yeah,
Good afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, I'm from Nepal, and being an irrigation professional, I have selected my priority assets as irrigation system. And for irrigation system, generally we divert water from the river to the canal. So our headwork is the first category of priority structure, and then main canal, and from main canal will be the secondary category, and from main canal to secondary canal and associated structure will be third category, and from secondary to the tailmost end of our irrigation system is the tertiary canal system. So that will be the lowermost end, and associated structure will be the lowest priority, and from that we actually provide the service, irrigation service to the farmers.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And again, so this here, my comment is going to be slightly in the opposite direction than the comment that I gave to Mohammed, in the sense that your lowest point, at least from what you said, it seemed to be a tertiary canal system. I would perhaps go down one more level to say, okay, do you have pipes in that tertiary canal system? In which case, some of those pipes and pumps that you might have, that might be the final level in your hierarchy, rather than just saying a canal system is the final level in your hierarchy, because you might have to gather data about individual assets within that system if you want to be able to manage and maintain that system better. Yeah. So again, have a balance. Don't stop too high in the hierarchy, and don't go too low in the level in your hierarchy as well. So it needs to effectively enable you to make decisions about individual assets that you need to maintain and manage. Okay. So if you stop too high, then you might not be able to do that.
Excuse me, sir. Like from our supply to delivery, while thinking about the asset management, we have to think for the complete setup.
Yeah.
It may be like we have so many secondary canal, we may conduct only one, but we may have to think for the complete setup from supply to the up to the delivery of the system.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Again, different organizations might handle this differently. What works for you is the most important thing. What makes most sense in terms of the asset hierarchy is the most important thing. But one thing to be clear is to have the level of detail in mind and get that right. So thanks a lot for all your input. Hopefully this has given you a good idea about how to form these asset hierarchies, and part of the homework exercise after this session is going to be to create a more full asset hierarchy for your system, and also to create an asset identification system for your asset hierarchy. So let's move on there. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts and your inputs. So hopefully this will enable screen sharing and you can see my screen. Right. So now that you've got a clear picture of what your assets are and how they are organized and interconnected through this hierarchy to deliver your services, now we can move on to step 3. So this is where you plan your data collection activities. Remember, this is the planning step. You're not there to actually go and collect data. So this is where you plan your data collection activities. So what are the things that you need to keep in mind when you're in this planning process? What data do you need to collect about each asset? So you need to identify what data are you going to collect about each asset, who is going to collect this data, how are you going to collect that data, and what kind of sources are you going to depend on in order to collect that data? Once you collect it, what format are you going to collect it in, and what format are you going to store the data in? And finally, when are you going to collect the data as well? So this plan should have a timeline associated with this as well. So have that clear-cut thinking process about planning the data collection activity. And then now we will run through each of these specific bits of data that you might want to collect in detail. So first off, I think when we had this Menti poll, a lot of people responded saying we collect location data about our assets, right? So location data, rightfully so, it comes up first. If you have a problem with the asset and it requires intervention, or say you need to carry out regular maintenance or inspection, you need to know its condition. So your asset database should clearly identify the location of that asset, so you don't have to go searching for it and waste time. Now, there are different ways in which you can think about the location of the asset. You can think about the location of the asset in terms of the location within the administrative divisions within the government or your organization. Now, this will tell you who is responsible for the asset and who is accountable for the asset. The other thing is address. It can tell you where it is exactly, the postcode and the address and so on. It will tell you where the asset is located. Sometimes you might want to denote the location of the asset in terms of the zone of service. Some organizations like water networks and so on, you might use some zoning to denote different parts of your water distribution system, and telling which asset belongs to which zone might be quite useful. For linear assets, it's going to be a bit tricky. So linear assets are assets like roads, rail, tracks, and so on. Here, in order to locate the assets, you might want to use the start and end distances or milestones that identify a specific section of the asset. So instead of saying we have got a road network in our city, you might want to actually say this road network consists of segments of roads. So you can then actually record condition data, location data, inspection data, and so on about the different sections of your road separately in your asset register. So that makes it more useful in terms of capturing and managing asset data. The other thing is map coordinates, and you might have your official land registry maps and so on. And the coordinates in your land registry maps might be used to as a location denoter, or you might even use latitude and longitude for GIS coordinates. Now, latitude and longitude coordinates can be very useful if you want to locate your assets very quickly using, say, smartphones or other GPS devices. If you have the lat-long coordinates, it can direct you to where the assets are. And we mentioned Google Earth earlier as well, and there are these publicly and freely available apps. Google Earth is one of them. And again, if you have the lat-long coordinates of the asset, you can use Google Earth to locate those assets very quickly. Now, all these things, they are useful for fixed assets, but of course not for mobile assets. Assets that move from place to place, it's really hard to keep track of the location of such mobile assets. And if you think that keeping track of the mobile assets are really, really important, then I'm afraid having a good GPS tracker on them is a useful solution. Otherwise, it's going to be really tricky in keeping track of the location of mobile assets. Moving on, the next up, condition data. Again, it came up in all of our discussions. Now, asset condition data, it can be quantitative or qualitative. It can be detailed or it can be generic. For instance, you might simply assign a good or a bad label to your assets, or it can be much more fine-grained than that. Now, I'll take you through one technique here. And now this is not the only technique, but this is one of the techniques that you could use. And one of the reasons for tracking the condition of any asset is to know how long it's going to last for before it's going to fail or it requires maintenance, right? So for this, first off, what you need to know is what is the expected service life of your asset? How long is it likely to last for? If you know or can estimate the expected service life of your assets, then you can measure the condition of your assets against that expected service life. Now note that the expected service life is going to be different to the design service life that you might have heard in the first workshop. The design service life is based on the ideal use, whereas expected service life is going to be based on realistic use. So when you're estimating the expected service life, you have to consider the standards of design and construction, how the asset is being utilized, what the operating environment is, what has been the maintenance regime on the asset, and so on and so forth, because all of this will have an impact on the expected service life. You need to keep in mind that lifespan estimates, it differs from one asset category to another, and it may also vary among asset types. For example, one type of a bridge might have a longer expected service life than another. We've given you on this slide, and again, the letters are small. Go and refer to the handbook. We've given some examples of expected service lives of different asset categories, but you have to actually do this yourself for your own assets. Now, assets that are closer to the end of the expected service life will generally be in a poor condition than newer assets, and these older assets may require more immediate attention or regular checkups, right? So the condition assessment then involves measuring how much of the expected service life is actually left. So in the example shown in the slide on the right-hand side, we have an example for a condition assessment score where lower the score, the better the condition. So a scoring criteria like this needs to be developed individually for each asset category and if necessary for each type. Now, remember that we are still in the planning step of the methodology. We are not collecting this data yet. So getting these kind of things right now will save a lot of pain later when you're actually collecting data. Now, keep in mind, if you look at the example with the condition assessment score, what we also have is a description, right? And there is an explained description of what each of the condition score means and what that means in terms of the expected service life. And this description is really, really important. So two people going to do the condition assessment will come back with similar answers. So one will not give a condition assessment score of 2 and another will not give a condition assessment score of 8. Now, if you have that clear description there and you plan this properly, you will get good results in data collection. So how will you actually carry out this condition assessment? Now, in some cases, you will carry out condition assessment by examining historical records or consulting with experienced engineer and other personnel. But wherever possible, you should try and visually assess the condition of your assets through on-site visits or specific tests, especially if the assets are at a high risk of failure or they're very high value assets for you. So nothing can actually replace that on-site visit in terms of asset condition data collection. So this data that you collect about asset condition during on-site visits, it will require some analysis, especially if different personnel comes back with different results, because different personnel it's going to be slightly subjective, and you can actually remove some of the subjectivity by having these clear descriptions. But nevertheless, different people may assess the condition of the assets differently, even if you have one standard method. Now, if you might have experienced this yourself, one person might say it looks really good, the bridge is looking really good. Another person might say, I don't think the bridge is really good, it's going to fall down. Now, when you're not sure of the assessment, it might be useful to get multiple expert opinions and then have a discussion and come to a collective agreement about what the actual condition of the asset is. And you might even have to collect other relevant evidence, like take pictures, look at schematics, design drawings and other engineering drawings, or any other data that you might be able to collect about the asset. And this might vary from asset to asset, what data you have and what data you might have to refer back to, or what documents you might have to refer back to. It varies from asset to asset. So we've talked through condition data. Now, knowing the condition of the asset is useful, but not useful unless you're actually you can tie it to performance. The asset performance assessment is going to tell you whether the asset can effectively support your systems or your community's needs. It will tell you what a particular condition score means in terms of the level of service the asset can provide. Just because an asset is in poor condition does not automatically mean that you have to take immediate action, right? So let's say you've discovered that a section of a footpath has developed a number of cracks and it has become overgrown with weeds and so on. Now you need to really understand how this poor condition affects the performance of the path. Are these cracks and or weeds and so on, is it going to hamper people from walking across that footpath? If not, then it's fine. But if it is, if the cracks are really big, and if it's going to cause safety issues, if it is going to cause pedestrians to fall over, trip over, and so on, then obviously that path is not serving its purpose. It's not in good performance level. It means that some work needs to be done on it. Okay, so collecting data on asset performance, it can be a bit complex and a sensitive process because it actually addresses the impact of the asset, which can't be objectively determined. Some might say, similar to the condition data again, some might say, there's no problem, you can always walk through it. You just need to be a bit careful, you just need to keep your eyes open and so on. But someone else might say, no, this is actually a really critical safety critical issue, and we need to fix this footpath. So if you have clearly outlined indicators similar to the asset condition description, if you have clearly outlined indicators, you can follow those guidance to assess the performance in a more objective manner and identify where interventions are required. Now, performance indicator ratings, it should include the physical condition of the assets, the operating performance, its reliability, its maintenance frequency, and so on. So this slide provides some guidance on how you can extend the physical condition assessment with operating performance indicators. Again, you can find this in the handbook, where you should develop guidelines that make more sense for your different types of assets. You will have to develop different guidelines during the planning phase. And this is why the planning phase is really, really important. Now, once you have these different condition ratings or the different performance ratings, you can create an overall performance rating by, for instance, taking the average score of the different ratings. And this performance rating can then be used to determine whether an action needs to be taken immediately or it can be postponed to a later date. So that was performance data. Next up is maintenance data. So along with the condition and performance and location and so on, you need to regularly collect data about the maintenance of your assets throughout the life cycle. This is often something that people forget to capture. When did assets fail? What kind of maintenance did you do? How much did it cost? And so on. This data, if you capture it very methodically, it will serve a great purpose in terms of future planning. So this data should include, as you can see in the slide, what kind of different maintenance activities are involved, how much does it cost to carry out these maintenance activities, who is responsible for the maintenance, what is the schedule for inspection and maintenance, if you have identified any defects through your inspection, a description of those identified defects. And if you can capture these defects and these descriptions in a standardized manner, that is even better. So two people doing the inspections don't write things in a different language or express it in a different way. As much as possible, if you can standardize the way you capture data, that'll be useful. And of course, work status. If you're doing some maintenance activities, where in the process is it? Have you just started it? Are you in the middle of it? Have you just finished that piece of work, and so on? If it is available and if it is possible to get this, you should also include other pieces of information like maintenance manuals, troubleshooting guides, access restrictions. If you have some problems in accessing this particular asset, those should be mentioned in your maintenance data as well. Any equipment requirements, if you want to go and inspect or maintain it, what kind of equipment should the people carry when they are going over to maintain or inspect that asset? The office or department that directly handles maintenance work orders will be the main source of such data, but you might also want to turn to finance or other offices for more comprehensive information. So that was maintenance data. Next off is financial data. Now, every asset management activity, it has got financial implications, right? So even building your asset register, it involves paying for staff, technology, equipment, travel, and so on. Assets also, on the other hand, can be important pieces of important sources of revenue as well. So whether it is through collection of user fees, tariffs, and so on, or leasing out or selling public land, they are sources of revenues. So some of the financial data that you need to have about your assets are: how much did it cost to buy, build, install? How much does it cost to operate and maintain? If you have to replace it today, how much will it cost? How much will it cost if you have to replace it 10 years down the line? Now, you will hear a lot more about different ways of handling financial data tomorrow with Vladimir's session. So I'm not going to spend any more time on it. So tomorrow's session is really super important because you will learn how to do valuation of your assets and how to calculate depreciation of that value over time, and so on. So that was our planning phase. Now, next up is the step where we actually go and collect data. Now we'll be exploring what are the different ways in which we can actually collect data. So we'll go on to that Zoom poll that you can see. I want to hear, what techniques do you use for collecting data about your assets? So just to have an idea of what you currently do. So as expected, manual survey is leading the race. And that's true for all organizations across the world. Manual survey is an essential part of collecting data, regardless of what kind of technologies you might have in place, how advanced you might be. It simply can't replace manual data. It's interesting actually to see satellite images and Google Earth. Perhaps there's an overlap between the two. Some people might be using Google Earth as a proxy for satellite images, but some organizations might actually be getting actual satellite data for managing or collecting data about their assets. So satellite images and Google Earth is the second, coming up second after manual survey. Also glad to see some people are using drones, so that's quite advanced, and some people even have sensors and are collecting data through sensors for monitoring their equipment. So that's great. I think more results are coming through, but the shift in balance, the balance between the different options here, it doesn't seem to change. But definitely this session, compared to the previous sessions that we have run for other regions, I think this region is using satellite images and Google Earth much more than the others, and drones as well. I don't recollect seeing so much use of drones in the previous sessions. So great. Okay, so I'll stop sharing this. So it's good to see that the variety of techniques being used for collecting data. And in the next part, we'll go through some of these techniques. How are you actually going to, what are the different ways in which you can actually collect the data? So before that, we'll take a quick coffee break again. We've been sitting in front of our laptops for a while. The exercise for this, if you are interested in going into the breakout sessions that we'll be putting you into, a nice icebreaker after you exchange contact information, introduce yourself, and so on. If you were given the money to spend on any kind of skills training for your staff, what would you spend it on? Just a suggested icebreaker question. Okay, so we'll come back in 5 minutes to continue. Okay, hopefully everyone has come back. So I'll restart my screen share. So we are into the last part of our workshop for today. This is the last section of the workshop for today. Just to remind you, we are in step 4. So we are finally talking about how to collect asset data. So we have gone through the planning phase, thinking about what data to collect and how and so on. Now we are about to actually collect data. Now, when it comes to data collection, remember that even if you don't have a formal asset data management system, you're most likely not starting from a blank sheet of paper, right? A variety of records probably already exist about your assets, as you've clearly mentioned at the start of this whole workshop. You already have some data about your assets. You just need to find them and organize them more effectively. For example, the financial data about your assets might be sitting in the procurement department, in their purchase orders, tender documents, and so on. Technical data can be obtained from the design and as-built drawings. Some of these you might have to talk to the contractors to obtain if you don't have them at hand. And this is a cheat, as I think I mentioned before. You might even use Google Earth to look at the satellite images of your region and identify your assets that are visible from the sky. Now, of course, don't forget the most important source of asset information, that is people's brains. A lot of people in your organization will have a lot of knowledge and information about your assets. Tap into their brains and the knowledge that they have, get that information and knowledge that sits in people's brains, get that formalized and systematized through your asset data management system. So that's really important as well. Now, it's useful to remember that 80-20 rule, that you can collect the first 80% of your data with 20% of your asset management team's resources, but collecting the last 20% of the data is likely to consume the remaining 80% of your resources. Now, that perhaps works also from a value perspective as well. Maybe you might obtain 80% of the value from that first 80% of your data. So similar to the way in which you are going to prioritize your asset management activities, you must also prioritize the data collection activities as well. So you know when to stop, when you have got the right amount of data, right quality of data, and so on, that serves the purposes of your asset management activities, and then move on. Okay. Right. Now, in terms of how to collect data, there's no better way to capture asset data than to actually do site visits and actually look, touch, and feel the assets, so to speak. On-site surveys, they provide the most accurate method of filling data gaps. Now, there are software tools and spreadsheets that can help assess the validity, completeness, and consistency of your data, but technology alone cannot confirm the accuracy of the data on the ground. So on-site visits, they will remain critical for gathering and verifying data for asset management. And I've seen that in your response as well. A lot of you use manual surveys, and this workshop, this talk is not about technology. It's not about replacing those manual surveys. It's about doing that better in a systematic way. So when you're going out on site visits, come equipped with a plan based on what data are most critical to collect for your assets. And this is why that planning phase we talked about earlier is really important. Don't just walk into a site without a clear plan. To facilitate your data collection on the ground, it's good practice to use worksheet templates, pre-prepared templates determined on the structure of your asset register database. Now, in the handbook, you might find some examples of these, but prepare this yourself for different types of assets. You might have to use different worksheet templates. So you go into a site, you can gather data in a systematic manner. Now, in most cases, you will want to start collecting data at the highest level in your asset register hierarchy and work your way down. Now, indeed, in addition to gathering new data during your site visit, you might actually use that opportunity to verify some other existing data as well. But be systematic about it. Otherwise, it might turn into a scattergun exercise. Now, although this might increase the time required for on-site survey, required to be on-site to complete your survey, it might ultimately save you time in terms of travel and related expenses if your sites, especially if your sites are geographically really spread out and multiple trips are going to be costly. So when you're there on site, make use of that time effectively. Now, I've put this off to the as late as possible, talking about technology. Now, where it makes sense, use technology to improve the data collection efficiency and quality. Now, when it comes to technologies, there are different types of technologies that you can think of. First off is manual assist. So technologies that assist a manual process. Now, these are, for example, instead of collecting data with pen and paper, you might do it using a handheld computer device like a tablet or a phone that is equipped with the GPS and so on. Now, simple smartphone devices that we all own, they are very powerful data capture and storage devices. Even the cheapest smartphone, they can scan barcodes, they can take pictures, they can geolocate assets and much more. So, it's really important to use these simple devices to assist the manual data collection process. Now, data collectors may work as a team, and they might even use additional equipment like simple laser-based measuring devices that will just speed up the whole process without making it too expensive. In addition to these manual assist process, there are completely automated technologies, so cutting-edge data collection equipment. They've got a high degree of automation and precision. They enable very fast and complete data collections, like sensors, like robots, and so on. However, this automated equipment, it's going to be costly. It's not going to be feasible for small municipalities. I've given a couple of examples. The picture on the top right corner there, it shows a completely automated robot with vision systems. This robot is used for inspecting a tunnel. Now, at the bottom left corner, again, another picture of an automated 3D imaging system that is actually fixed to a train that passes through a tunnel. Now, these images that are captured at a regular basis, they can be automatically checked using machine learning algorithms and so on for deviations from normal conditions, such as appearance of a new crack. But these automated techniques, they are fancy, they are very useful, but they are very expensive as well. So be careful in terms of spending money on these automatic data collection devices. There's something in the middle ground as well that is semi-automated. It involves comparable equipment like the automated method, but somewhat lesser degree of automation. So drones are a popular example of this, such a technology. So you still need a person to fly the drones, to fly it to the right location, to point the camera to the right location, and so on, take pictures. You'll still need people to use that, but it can kind of speed up the data capture. It can make data capture a much more safer process. In the UK, for example, drones are becoming very popular in terms of inspecting bridges. So to fly the drone into specific nooks and corners of the bridges, take pictures and so on, instead of using people in a rather unsafe manner, drones are becoming more popular to do that. I'm working on a project with a container port terminal, and they're using drones for inspecting these huge cranes in the container terminal. Now, another example on the slide, the picture on the right bottom corner, it shows how images can be captured using the reversing camera of a car. So most of the modern cars have got reversing cameras, and you can hack into these cameras and use those cameras to capture images of the road. And these images can then be used to detect defects or potholes on road surfaces. So there are all these different technologies that are available, but use the technology where they make sense. Okay. Now, once you collect the data, they must undergo a proper expert-led review. Data validation is really important, and it should be done by a team of experts with proper asset management experience and familiarity with your assets. The purpose of the data validation step is to ensure that the data is of good quality. I think someone mentioned data validation earlier as well. So think about each of the data quality metrics that we discussed earlier and get a sense of the quality of data that you have. Get your data reviewed by these experts, and these experts might even be able to provide you with a quantitative sense of data quality using metrics like the one that I've shown on the slide for accuracy. Now, remember this, I'll come back to this. The aim is not to get the data perfect. You can never achieve perfection unless you have an infinite amount of money and resources. There is always that diminishing marginal value for data quality. So you need to decide what is good enough for you and other stakeholders of your assets. In addition to the data quality metrics that we discussed earlier, you might also want to make sure through this validation step that the data is secure, the data collection techniques are affordable, it is actually giving you good value for money, and so on. So this is the final poll for this workshop. Moving on to step 6, establishing that asset register. We are going to talk about how to store the data, what are the different systems to store the data. So I want to get your view. What systems do you use to store asset data? So we're going to have a Zoom poll now. Walla, if you can bring up the Zoom poll, just to get a picture of what kind of systems you use for storing asset data.
This is also very important in stages in Asia-Pacific countries. We need to have a very good asset register. So based on your experience, let's have a response.
And Mohan, perhaps you can also take the example of what you do in Nepal or planning to do in Nepal as well.
Yeah, in Nepal we are we still have a asset register manual, but this year government has introduced public asset management system software. Yeah. That has been very good step in asset management in Nepal. So like that, maybe in Bangladesh it's still Excel based. I think Biran can confirm, and then other countries we can share your experience. The results are coming. Paper records mostly like 57%, and Excel. Yeah, Excel of course it always leads the game. Excel, I mean paper records, the Access also we are using. Some of the countries asset management software. We almost 34% responding with asset management software. So I think it's a good step.
Yeah, I think if I'm honest, that is actually pleasantly surprising. That 35%, 1/3 of the participants, you're actually using some proper asset management software. But of course, paper records and Excel, they always lead the game, regardless of who I'm asking the question to. But that's a surprising outcome, that asset management software is so high up on the list. Okay, so that's great. Thanks a lot for your input. Gives me a clear idea of where you stand in terms of your asset data management practices. If I can just stop sharing this. So let's look at what are the possible systems for managing and storing asset data that we have available in the market. So if you look at the market for asset data management solutions, there are a number of different solutions that are available. Now I've kind of broadly categorized them into these 3 categories: generic data management systems, enterprise asset management systems, which is probably what people who voted for asset management software meant, and asset specific data systems as well. Most of us are already familiar with generic data management systems like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, PDF files. A lot of people store, especially inspection records, in PDF files, and a lot of the digitalization exercises are geared towards scanning old handwritten documents into PDF files. Now, it's a bit tricky to use PDF files effectively because some of the PDF files are not searchable. So be careful in using PDF files for storing data. For those who cannot afford Microsoft products, now Microsoft products, they obviously require a license fee to be paid. They're not free. There are open source versions of all the Microsoft products, such as OpenOffice. They provide similar capabilities as well. Now, other than that, there are the simple database systems such as Microsoft Access, or even, again, open source versions of database systems as well, like MySQL. Now, with the databases and Excel and so on, in order to really exploit the potential of any of these tools, you need to have the right skills in place. Excel is a very powerful tool if you know how to really use it. Now, on top of these generic data management systems, there are specialized enterprise asset management systems. Now, you might have heard of IBM Maximo and ABB Ellipse and so on. They're highly popular. They provide very efficient systems and tools to manage asset data. However, these require often require heavy investment in terms of money, skills, and effort, and so on. If you can afford it, great. And I can see that around 35% you've started using such systems. But do think about this 2 or 3 times before you actually jump in and make that huge investment. Finally, there are some specialized solutions for specific type of assets. So I mentioned a few here: iRoads for highway assets, Bridge Station for bridges, Invida and Planet for facility management and buildings. But whatever it is, remember that the software is not the solution to your data problem. You need to have good data management practices and procedures in place. The software simply supports good business processes. If you don't have a good process in place, the software is not going to help you. So keep that in mind always in kind of selecting what system to use. The capability of these systems can be varied. Some of the systems, they provide an efficient asset register. Some of them offer work order management capabilities, and a few of them offer fully fledged data analytics and decision support capabilities as well. So in fact, as you grow in maturity in terms of capturing and exploiting data, you might actually find that different sets of systems might offer you capabilities for different kinds of activities rather than requiring a single monolithic solution. You might even decide to develop some of these systems in-house as well as you become more mature in terms of your data management capability, so that these systems can be tailored to your specific needs. So ultimately, the message is to choose that is something that is appropriate for you. The functionality and the degree of complexity of your database need to suit and reflect the nature, size, and the complexity of the assets that you have. Smaller municipalities, for example, you might just start off with a simple spreadsheet or a database software. Large governments with extensive portfolios, large organizations, they might require more complex systems and more sophisticated software systems. Okay, so choose that whatever is appropriate. Now we move on to what we say the final step, but then it is not really final. Once you get all the data in place, the journey actually doesn't really end. You have only really begun the journey. So it's really important to keep your asset data updated over time. Data should be considered as an asset. Just like your assets might degrade if you don't maintain it, your asset data will also degrade and fail if you don't keep it maintained and up to date. So your asset management information team must periodically assess whether the information that you're receiving is adequate to meet the local demand and the needs of the local asset management activities. Assessment also should check whether the results of the decisions that are being driven through the asset data is delivering the expected outcomes. Now, asking these questions on a regular basis, it can help you improve many elements of your asset register database. The answers might, for instance, change your specification against which the data was collected. So you might also revise these information requirements and business processes as your information system becomes more and more sophisticated. So when you establish such a sound information system, the feedback cycle that is shown in this figure, it's set in motion. So it's a never-ending process. As I said before, it's not a project that has got an end point. This should be the new business as usual. So that brings us to the end of today's workshop, and thanks a lot for listening to me. The sun has actually risen here. It's shining. The key takeaways of the day, so you can walk away with these key messages: a systematic methodical approach to data collection. It will result in a more effective and a robust asset management system, and it will deliver reliable information that is necessary for sound decision making. If you have good data about the location, the condition, performance, and finances of your assets, it will allow governments to anticipate the resources that are required, especially for critical assets. Ensuring good quality of data, it's a collective effort. However, the cost of collecting, validating, and maintaining the data, it should not exceed the value of information. So you should always have that cost-benefit ratio in mind. And the final note, the key to success in all this is to have long-term commitment and top-level support from the government and the leadership of the organization. If you have that, you will succeed. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to succeed. So on that note, I will wrap up the workshop here. I will just quickly take you through the homework exercise that you need to do to get your certificate. So it's really a continuation of the exercise, the individual exercise that you started off earlier. So you start off with your, so it's this homework exercise is for you to develop an asset hierarchy for the system, for a system that you are responsible for. So starting off with the asset system, identify the asset categories and the subcategories, and from that list you create that asset hierarchy for that for the system, adding and removing branches as necessary. Create that asset hierarchy, identify where to stop, clearly where to stop as well. And based on that hierarchy, I also want you to develop or implement an identification system that actually makes sense for that hierarchy. And once you have that identification system, start trying to identify what are the different types of data that you might start collecting, or you might want to collect at the different levels of the hierarchy. So again, the message is be careful, don't get too granular, or it can make the data collection exercise very costly and difficult to manage. So think through this initial planning process, and that's what the exercise is going to be. So thanks a lot for listening. Tomorrow's session is going to be run by Vladimir at same time. Vlado, do you want to say a few words about what you will be talking about tomorrow? If Vlado is not there, I'll do a quick highlight. So tomorrow you will learn a lot more about financial data, about the assets. How do you evaluate? How do you have a good valuation of your assets? How do you understand how the value of the assets might depreciate over time? The different models that can be used for calculating depreciations. Oh, I can see Vlado. Vlado, do you want to do a quick intro to what we can expect tomorrow? No, go ahead.
Yes, you started. Those are the most important topics we're going to discuss tomorrow. It's about how to evaluate the assets, how to calculate the depreciation of the assets, how to, when we know the value of the assets, to see what are the critical assets, how to prioritize critical assets, risk assessment, risk management, a little bit how to use the risk metrics. And also on the end, we're going to see the financial planning, capital planning versus asset management planning, what we need and what we can afford. And on the end, we will present key indicators, how to measure municipal development index, and how to measure our asset management information system. So those are the key topics for tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
Right. Okay. So thanks a lot for that. Is Daniel or someone? Does anyone have a closing message, or shall we say goodbye to our participants and see tomorrow? I think that's it. So thanks a lot for attending. It was a pleasure talking to you. It's always a pleasure talking to people from my part of the world. So we'll see you tomorrow for the next the day 2 of the data capture and utilization session. So thanks a lot. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.